There is one date in this story that does not work, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. A clause that decided who would inherit a 12,000-acre estate carried a signature from late 1999. But the marriage everyone assumes it was written to block did not happen until the spring of 2005. 2 of the 3 people who signed it were dead by the winter of 2002. So the document that allegedly took an estate away from Camilla's children was signed and witnessed more than 5 years before she became the king's wife, by 2 women who never lived to see that wedding. Somebody in that family saw all of it coming. And on the morning this story turns on, their great-nephew walked into a cold records room in the countryside carrying 3 keys and a cracked leather folder with a dead queen's crest on the front of it. Then he placed both on the table in front of Camilla's children. Stay with this one and make sure you are subscribed before we begin, because this is the kind of story that gets buried quickly unless the sequence is told in the right order. By the end of this, you will know what was written on line 4 of that legal opinion. You will know the name of the man who ended up with the estate, and you will understand why the Queen left a house in Wiltshire that had been hers for 30 years and had her name taken off the deeds within weeks. That last part is the reason this story matters. Out of order, it looks like paperwork. In order, it looks like a warning. Start with the morning, because the shape of that morning tells you everything about who held the power. The estate sits in the West Country, and the name used by household staff was Ravensmere. The family has never publicly confirmed the full arrangement, so the land parcel itself does not matter here. What matters is the scale. 12,000 acres, a Jacobean manor, 42 cottages still under tenancy, 2 working farms, a private lake, and a collection of paintings that has never appeared in any public inventory, which by itself tells you what kind of settlement this was. Camilla's family arrived that morning expecting a formality. Nobody came dressed for a fight. Their understanding was simple. Everyone was there to sign off a schedule of works and go home by lunchtime, and 15 years of behavior seemed to support that belief. But this next detail is the one that stays with me. The staff had started calling one of the best rooms upstairs Mr. Parker Bowles's study, not as a joke, not casually, on a rota, on a cleaning schedule, in the ordinary way a working house names its rooms. And on that particular morning, someone on the staff placed fresh flowers inside it, expensive flowers, cut and brought up from the rooms before 8 in the morning, because the family were coming and because the room was understood to belong to the man arriving with them. Hold that image, because by sunset, the same person carried those flowers back out. The observation is small, the consequence is not. A household does not rename a room on rumor. At some point across those 15 years, somebody with authority had allowed the staff to believe the room was his. And those flowers on the windowsill became physical proof that the people running that house believed the transfer had already happened in everything except paper. Then William arrived, and the way he arrived was the first warning. Nobody in that house read it. There was no motorcade, no advance notice to the household, no line in the court circular, the public record where official royal engagements are listed. That absence mattered, because anything the palace considers formal royal business normally appears there. Instead, one dark car came through the eastern gates at 8:46 in the morning. 2 solicitors stepped out behind him, each carrying an identical black document case. That was the second warning. A man does not bring 2 lawyers to a conversation about roof repairs. The third warning should have drained the room of air, but it passed straight over them. William did not enter through the main doors. He crossed the gravel around the side of the house, past the drawing room where his father and stepmother were waiting with the fires already lit, and let himself into the old estate office at the back. That was the damp room where the land records had been kept under lock since Victoria was on the throne. Take those 3 details in sequence, and the warning explains itself. No announcement, 2 solicitors, and the first room he chose was the room with the deeds. William had not come to negotiate. He had come to the place where the evidence was kept, and he got there first. Now this is the part most versions of the story get wrong, and it matters to be fair here. The easy version makes Camilla's family look ridiculous, but the easy version is lazy. They did not invent this expectation. They were told. A member of staff found Camilla shortly after 9 to say William was in the building. She assumed he had come about the renovations, and that assumption was reasonable, because renovations had been the main subject of discussion for almost 2 years. The east wing needed structural work. 2 of the lead roofs were leaking. There were active conversations about bringing several outer cottages up to a standard where members of her extended family could use them all year round, not only in August. Charles had encouraged all of it privately, never on paper. always in the way families with this kind of money have done business for generations, because a promise on paper invites questions, while a promise over lunch does not. 5 words had been repeated over the years, and those were the words the household remembered. You'll always have Ravensmere. On their own, those 5 words sound harmless. They stop being harmless the moment someone spends real money because of them. And Camilla's side had spent. Architectural drawings had been paid for. Furniture had been measured to the inch, because the doorways in a Jacobean house do not take modern pieces easily, and anything commissioned for that kind of building has to be made for the room. There had even been a conversation about moving a string of show horses onto the southern paddocks. Her son had been taken down into the cellar and shown which bottles belonged to the house and which ones he was welcome to open. Live like that for 15 years, and belief hardens into fact. Every time your car comes through those gates, staff greet you like the coming owner. Nobody corrects the assumption, because nobody in service corrects a member of the royal family about anything. That is the fair version. They were not thieves. They were people who trusted an assurance from a man who did not have the authority to give it. And the person who allowed that assumption to continue for 15 years without checking the paperwork stood above both sides in every photograph of that family. Now comes the harder version. Belief is one thing, spending trust money is another, and the survey invoice for £18,400 would soon become one of the most uncomfortable pieces of paper in the entire folder, because that invoice is the moment this stopped being a family disagreement and became a legal one. William put a 6-page legal opinion on the table in that cold room and said one sentence: "None of you were ever beneficiaries." Read the tense in it, because the tense is the whole weapon. He did not say the estate has been taken back. He did not say a decision has been made. Either of those admits that they held something and lost it. Wherever reaches back behind them, past the drawings and the measured furniture and the flowers in the study, all the way to the first day any of them drove up that avenue. And it says there was never anything here for you to lose. Anger tells somebody they crossed a line. That sentence tells them the line was drawn before they arrived by people they never met. And this is where I stopped being able to keep Diana out of it, because I have watched William handle rooms like that one before, and the pattern is always the same. He does not raise his voice and he does not improvise. He arrives with the document. He learned that the hard way. His mother died without any of this settled, and the public record of what followed is grim reading. Her will was published, the way wills are, and there is a letter of wishes attached to it about her personal things, and the family varied the terms of what she left, so that her sons received the estate at 30, rather than at 25. A boy of 15 watched adults sit in rooms and decide on paper what would happen to everything his mother owned, and he had no say in any of it because he was a child, and children do not sit on trustee boards. 29 years later, the same man sits on every trustee board that matters. People keep describing this as William becoming ruthless. I read it as a man who found out early what a document can do to a family, and who decided he would rather be the one holding it. Camilla came into the estate office at about 9:20. Charles followed her a few minutes later, and the people in that room describe him as irritated, not frightened, not angry about the substance of it, irritated in the specific way of a man who has been told about something at the same time as everybody else. His complaint, before he had read a line, was that this had not been brought to him privately first. Sit with that reaction for a second, because it is more revealing than anything he said afterwards. His first instinct was the procedure. His son had walked into a family estate with 2 solicitors, and the thing that bothered the king was not being consulted about the meeting. That tells you where the power in that room had already moved to, and everybody at the table worked it out at the same moment. William stayed sitting. One hand rested on a leather folder, cracked along the spine, the kind of thing that has spent 40 years in a strong room. Charles saw the folder before he saw his son's face, and the color went out of him, because he recognized the faded gold crest stamped on the front of it. It belonged to his grandmother. He had not read a word at that point. He did not need to. A man who grew up in that family knows exactly what it means when the Queen Mother's own estate folder comes out of a vault and lands on a table in front of him with a solicitor sitting next to it. The contents of that folder are where a family argument turns into something much colder. Charles did not buy Ravensmere. The state did not hand it to Camilla. It has never been Crown Estate property either, and that distinction catches most people out, because the Crown Estate is the enormous public portfolio that does not belong to the monarch personally and never has. Ravensmere sits somewhere else entirely, inside a private family settlement drawn up decades ago, and that settlement has been amended 3 times. The first amendment stopped anybody selling the land. The second condition stopped anyone from demolishing the house. The third dealt with succession, and nobody sitting at that table on that morning had ever read it. Now, this is the term that decides the entire story, and it can be explained simply. Charles held what the lawyers called a life interest. That meant he could live there, farm it, take income from the 2 working farms, host whoever he wanted, and spend money on the roofs. All of that was his for as long as he was alive. But there was one thing a life interest did not give him. It did not give him the right to decide what happened to the asset after his death. He held the keys to that house during his lifetime, but he never held the power to choose who received it next. For 15 years, according to this account, he allowed others to believe that he did, and those 2 things must be separated because they are not the same. Making a promise you cannot keep is careless. Allowing people to spend money on the strength of that promise for 15 years without going back to check the deed is something else entirely. And the bill for that landed on his wife's children in a cold room where the fire had not even been lit. Camilla's daughter asked the obvious question, the same question anyone would ask. If the king controlled the estate while he was alive, why did the choice about what happened afterward sit outside his hands? The senior solicitor opened the folder and answered her, and the answer stopped the room. The choice had been taken away from him before the marriage, not after it. Before. That is the point that changes everything. Someone had sat down years before any of this became official and worked out that Charles might marry Camilla, that her children would come with her, that a house they all loved might begin to look like theirs, and that a fond promise made at a lunch table could one day be treated almost like a title deed. So that person did the only thing that has ever truly worked inside that family. They wrote it down, and they got it signed. Everybody in that room looked at William and waited for him to say the late Queen's name. That was the natural assumption. Queen Elizabeth II had spent 70 years protecting the shape of the monarchy, and she had the authority to do exactly this. But William did not say her name, because her signature was not the one that mattered here. The binding amendment carried a date from late 1999. Take that date apart. Charles and Camilla married in April 2005, which means the clause came more than 5 years before the wedding. At the end of 1999, they had only been seen together publicly a limited number of times, and the palace was still managing the question of whether Camilla would ever be fully acknowledged at all. The Queen Mother died in March 2002. Princess Margaret died in February of the same year. Both women were gone 3 years before Charles and Camilla married, and both of their signatures were on the page. The Queen Mother's signature was thin and unsteady, the hand of a woman in her late 90s. Beneath it was a bolder second signature belonging to Princess Margaret, and the wording of that clause is the reason 4 adults sat in silence inside that cold records room. Anyone who knew that family privately knew what Margaret was like behind closed doors. In public, she was often remembered as the difficult sister. Inside the family, she was the one who watched people closely, who remained careful about outsiders, and who cared about property in a way others sometimes found uncomfortable to discuss. Trust papers from that period reportedly show Margaret raising a concern at a meeting. Her worry was straightforward. A second marriage could carry the estate out of the bloodline and into a family the original settler had never intended to include. And it could happen slowly, through assumption, kindness, and habit, without anyone ever holding a formal vote on it. She did not need to name anyone. Instead, she had the wording changed. And the wording was brutal. No spouse, no child of a spouse, and no descendant unrelated by direct blood to the line of King George VI shall ever take permanent title, controlling interest, or beneficial ownership. Sit with what that does. Camilla's children were not named in the clause. Being named and refused would at least have made it a decision about them as people. This clause did something colder. It created a category, and anyone who ever fell into that category was excluded forever, before their names even mattered. In late 1999, 2 women, one in her 60s and one in her 90s, looked at a relationship the country had not yet accepted and legally guarded against a family structure that did not yet officially exist. Margaret had seen the danger early. That is the detail that keeps returning to the center of the story. She predicted the marriage. She predicted the blending of families. She predicted that a house could drift toward a new set of children through nothing more than familiarity and generosity. And she closed the door 6 years early. People often talk about William as the one in that family with a long memory. According to this account, he inherited that instinct from somewhere. Now watch Charles, because the next 90 seconds in that room were among the most painful of his adult life. He said he had not known about it. And that may be true. William responded by placing a second paper on the table, a signed page from November 1999. Charles's own signature was on it. He had either read it or been given it to read, and he signed it more than 5 years before the wedding he would later build promises around. Charles said nothing for several seconds. The solicitor continued speaking because someone had to. The fair version for Charles is this. The exclusion was not written in simple, obvious language on that page. It sat inside a restructuring of several royal properties, a long technical document about consolidating settlements, and Ravensmere appeared in it only by reference. A man in his early 50s, living through one of the most difficult decades of his personal life, may have signed a bundle of estate papers placed before him by his grandmother's solicitors without chasing down every cross-reference. That is the charitable explanation. But the harder version is this. He could have checked at any point in the 26 years that followed. Every time someone thanked him for a promise about that house, he had another chance to check. Every time renovations were discussed. Every time rooms were treated as if they already belonged to Camilla's family. Every time money was spent because of an expectation he had encouraged, he had another chance to open the file and confirm the truth. He never did. Because checking risks finding an answer you do not want. Both versions can be true at once. He may have been careless in 1999, and he may have been silent for the 26 years afterward, but it was the silence that did the greater damage. That silence had a long history behind it. The country had seen versions of it before, during the years when Diana was chased through car parks and photographed in distress. But William had seen it from far closer than the country ever could. And now, in the cold records room at Ravensmere, he was not only looking at a property dispute, he was looking at a pattern, a promise made without authority, a warning written years before the crisis arrived, a family allowed to believe one thing while the paperwork said another, and a father who had once again waited too long to face the consequences of his own silence. Charles rarely lies to anybody. He goes quiet and lets people believe whatever keeps the lunch table calm, and that habit has cost this family more than any lie he could have told. And a family that has watched him closely for years will not be surprised by any of that. Last time I walked through how William shut down a royal luncheon after Camilla tried to move George's seat away from Catherine, and hundreds of you wrote the same thing underneath it, that the interesting part was not the seating plan, it was that Charles sat there and let it happen. Same man, same instinct, same silence. On a subject worth 12,000 acres, there was a way out, and this is the detail that turns the whole thing. That clause could still be amended with the consent of all the trustees, not a majority of them, all of them, and the trustee whose consent could not be bought, moved, or gone around, is William. That is the position Charles found himself in. He could not give his wife's family the estate on his own, and he could not amend the rule that stopped him without the agreement of the one person in the family who had spent his adult life watching this exact maneuver happen to his mother. He tried anyway, twice. The 2 attempts he made are worth going through slowly because they tell you this was never a misunderstanding. The first proposal was simple: set up a new trust and name Camilla's children as the beneficiaries of it. Clean, obvious, and it walked straight into the middle of the 1999 wording, because a new trust changes nothing about who is allowed to end up beneficial ownership at the end of the chain. William turned it down inside a week. The second proposal is the one that gave the game away. Somebody on Charles's side offered a lease, 99 years at £1 a year to Camilla's children. Look at how clever that is. On paper, the bloodline keeps the title. Nothing is sold, nothing is transferred, no beneficiary is named, and the 1999 clause is never touched. The family would keep owning a house that another family would occupy until the year 2124, which in practice means forever. And everybody could go on saying, with a straight face, that the estate had stayed exactly where it was. Whoever drafted that had read the 1999 amendment line by line and gone looking for the gap in it. And that is the part that finished the innocent explanation for me, because you do not accidentally engineer a workaround for a clause you have never heard of. They knew. Somewhere on that side of the family, somebody knew about the exclusion and went looking for a way through it. The Queen Mother's solicitors had shut that door too. Any lease running beyond 21 years needs the agreement of every trustee, which puts it back in front of the same man who turned down the first proposal. William refused it as well. Stop and look at what those 2 women did in 1999. They did not write one rule. They wrote a rule, then they sat and worked out how a determined king might get around it in 30 years' time. And they blocked the direct transfer, the new trust, and the long lease before any of the 3 had been thought of. 26 years of moves, anticipated and answered in advance, by a woman who was 99 and her daughter. That goes a long way past estate planning. That is somebody who knew precisely what her own family was capable of. After 2 refusals, the sensible move from Charles's side would have been to stop. This is the point where the invoices changed the entire shape of the story, because the version people kept repeating did not line up with the paperwork. Watch what happened 3 weeks after those refusals, and the reason becomes clear. 3 weeks later, contractors came through the gates at Ravensmere. They did not inspect the leaking lead roofs, which had been the work everyone had discussed for nearly 2 years and the reason the family kept saying money was needed. Instead, they carried out a residential survey. They measured the west wing. They went through the historic kitchens. They assessed whether the long nursery corridor upstairs could be divided into private apartments. Nobody told William. The survey cost £18,400, and somebody charged it to an estate maintenance account, not to a private account, not to Charles personally. It was charged to the maintenance budget of the trust that William oversaw as a trustee, and the line on the invoice, typed by a contractor who had no idea what he had just walked into, read, "Future Occupancy Adaptation." 4 words on a builder's invoice ended 15 years of assumption. William found it while going through routine roofing costs. He saw a charge he did not recognize, sitting in a category that should have contained slate, lead, scaffolding, and repair work, but instead described preparations for people to live inside the house. Anyone in his position would ask the same question: occupancy by whom? He pulled the recent invoices for the estate, and the second document was worse than the first. A furniture order. Custom mahogany shelving cut to the dimensions of a specific room, and a glass wine room, the kind of thing someone installs in a building they expect to own, not a place they visit for Christmas. The name on that order was Parker Bowles. Line those 2 documents up, and the whole picture changes. A survey to convert a wing into permanent apartments, paid for from trust money. A furniture order in the name of a family, the 1999 clause specifically barred from ever holding an interest in the building. Conversations at a lunch table can be denied, forgotten, softened, or reinterpreted 20 different ways. An invoice cannot. An invoice has a date, an amount, an account it was charged to, and a name attached to it. And that is where William stopped having a choice, which is the part of this story almost everyone misread. A trustee carries far more than a relative's opinion. A trustee has a legal duty to the trust itself. If he sees trust money being spent to prepare a property for people who can never lawfully hold an interest in it, and he does nothing, then he has failed in that duty. He becomes personally answerable for the silence. Sitting quietly to keep peace at Christmas stopped being an option the moment that invoice was charged to the maintenance account. People around William say he kept returning to the same point. His mother had spent her adult life surrounded by people who assured her of one thing while documents said something else entirely. Diana discovered the difference between promises and paperwork far too late. Catherine held the same view for her own reasons. Their 3 children would inherit inside settlements drafted by people who had died before they were born, and both parents had now read every one of those settlements line by line. Camilla's family had not merely hoped for that house. Somebody on their side had spent the trust's own money preparing it for them. That was what forced the meeting. That was why 2 solicitors got out of the car. And that was why a man who usually avoided scenes walked past the drawing room and went straight to the records office. Back in the cold room, Camilla defended her family, and her defense was accurate. Nobody had taken anything. The surveys were preliminary. No lease had been signed. The furniture had not been delivered, let alone installed. Every one of those statements was true, and she was right to make them. William was not accusing anyone of theft. His case was narrower and much harder to answer. They were preparing to receive something they had no legal route to receive, and they were doing that preparation with the trust's money. At that point, Camilla's son pushed the leather folder back across the table. The line William gave him is the one that reportedly went around Windsor afterward. Assurances are not ownership. Charles made one more attempt, and it was the weakest thing he said all morning. This could have been handled privately. William's answer closed the meeting. It was private until estate money paid for it. There was the fault line in the entire family, exposed in one exchange. The royal system has managed scandals for a century by keeping them inside the building. And it works, because families can argue over the same grievance for 40 years without a word of it ever reaching print. But money behaves differently. An account has entries. A trust has records other trustees can read. And a trustee who spots misapplied funds and stays quiet becomes part of the problem. Camilla understood the size of that faster than anyone else at the table. And this is where the story turns toward the most important part. She was not sitting there thinking only about a manor house. She had worked out something that took the others another fortnight to understand. A man willing to open one settlement and read it line by line in front of his father, with 2 solicitors sitting beside him, was a man who would open the others. And she had more to lose in the others than anyone in that room had realized. Her daughter tried the last available argument. If the estate could not go to Camilla's children, then it would go to William eventually. So, in her view, this was a son taking a house away from his father's wife. But William had closed that door 9 days earlier. He had signed a renunciation of any personal claim to Ravensmere. 9 days before that meeting, in writing, witnessed, he had declared that he would never live there, never own it, and never draw income from it. That single fact reorganized everything. A man does not spend 2 years fighting over an estate he has formally given up. He was not deciding whether he wanted it. He was deciding where it legally landed. Renouncing his own claim triggered the succession clause in the 1999 settlement, and that clause ran down the bloodline in order until it found someone who qualified. That was what William came to that room to begin, and that was why he wanted his father and Camilla in the building while it happened. Follow the chain, because the family in that room had to follow it live in front of 2 solicitors and watch each name fall away. Harry was not named in the settlement. The 1999 drafting predated the later family split by decades, so his absence had nothing to do with any modern dispute. He was a 15-year-old boy at school when the clause was written, and the drafters had followed the line as it stood. Anne had already stepped aside. She had declined years earlier and put the declination in writing, which was perhaps the most Anne detail in the entire story. Andrew came next, and the temperature in the room dropped again, because Charles had spent years making sure his brother's name was attached to as little property as possible. Andrew was disqualified by the terms themselves after stepping back from public duties. With William renounced, Harry unnamed, Anne declined, and Andrew disqualified, 1 name remained. Camilla's son asked the solicitor to read the 4th line again. The solicitor read it again. Edward, Duke of Edinburgh, sole beneficiary of the Ravensmere estate. Nobody at that table moved. Not Camilla, not her children, not the king. Then the second half of it landed, and nobody had seen it coming, because Edward had accepted the inheritance with a condition written in his own hand. The house would not become his private residence. The estate's income, the farms, the cottages, the tenancies, all of it would fund a working charity for wounded veterans, bereaved service families, and young people leaving the care system at 18 with nowhere to go. His own family would retain use of the chapel. That was all he kept for himself. Take a moment with that, because it was the cleverest move anyone made in this story, even if Edward may not have intended it as a move at all. Think how differently that room would have felt if Edward had taken Ravensmere as a private estate. Camilla's family would have had a villain to point toward, an ambitious younger brother sweeping in and taking a house away from a woman in her 70s. Every version of the story would have run that way, and it would have run that way for years. Instead, they lost 12,000 acres to a man who gave almost all of its use away to soldiers' widows, bereaved families, wounded veterans, and young people with nowhere else to go. That made anger harder. It made accusation harder, and it made the paperwork almost impossible to challenge without looking as though they were arguing against the very people the charity was built to serve. There is no way to be angry at that in public. There is no briefing you can give a friendly journalist about it. Any complaint from Camilla's side now reads as a family objecting that a charity for the war wounded got the cottages they wanted for their horses. There is one more thing in that condition, and I doubt Edward wrote it by accident. The last cause Diana took up before she died was the one nobody in that palace wanted to touch, and she walked a cleared path through a minefield in Angola in January 1997 to put it on every front page in the world. Wounded soldiers, widows, the people a war leaves behind. Her brother-in-law has now attached that same constituency to 12,000 acres of family land, in a document, permanently. 2 versions of the same family now sit on the same land, and they will sit there for the next 50 years. One side wanted a wine room and a converted nursery corridor. The other side is putting bereaved families into the cottages. Charles understood what that comparison would do to him long before he reached the car, and I think the loss of the story hurt him more than the loss of the house. William handed 3 keys to Edward's solicitor across that table. The chapel key stayed with Edward's family. Charles asked him what was supposed to happen now to the rooms that had been prepared. The solicitor answered instead of William, and the answer took 10 words. The prepared rooms returned to the estate. Time to pay back what I promised you at the start and to tell you why I think it landed the way it did. Camilla did not stay to the end of that meeting. She left the estate office before the solicitors had finished putting their papers away, and she did not go through the drawing room where the fires were still lit, and she did not wait for her husband. A car took her out through the eastern gates about 90 minutes after William came in through them. By early afternoon, she was in Wiltshire. Nobody has confirmed why she left that morning. The land registry entry that followed says plenty. Ray Mill House is the one piece of property in this story that has never been anybody's to argue about. She bought it in 1996 for £850,000 out of her own settlement in the divorce from Andrew Parker Bowles. And she bought it in her own name at a point in her life when a great many people had written her off. It sits near Lecoq, an ordinary distance from an ordinary village, 6 bedrooms, a stretch of garden running down to the river. She kept it when she married Charles. That was a condition of the marriage as far as she was concerned, and it was written into the arrangements around the wedding in 2005. Everything else in her life belongs to the institution. Clarence House belongs to the institution. The Windsor houses, the estates, the offices, the cars, the jewelry she wears to a state banquet, the pictures on the wall behind her at Christmas. She has the use of all of it, and she owns none of it. And on the day Charles dies, the use of most of it goes with him. Ray Mill was the exception. One house, in her name, outside every settlement, outside the duchy, outside the trusts, and beyond the reach of any trustee alive. Now put yourself in the passenger seat of that car. She had spent the morning watching a 30-year-old promise about a different house dissolve in front of her children, and watching her husband, the king, discover that he had signed away the power to keep his own word before either of them had a wedding date. She had watched a trustee open one settlement, read it out, and hand 12,000 acres to somebody else by lunchtime. And the whole way to Wiltshire, she would have been doing the same arithmetic anybody would do. Every asset she touches sits inside a document somebody else controls, and every one of those documents can be opened, read out, and enforced by a man in his 40s who has demonstrated that he will do exactly that in front of the family. Every asset except one. Within a matter of weeks, the title to Ray Mill House changed hands. Land registry records show the property registered to Harry Lopes, her son-in-law, and to a financier named Jake Irwin, and the understanding reported at the time is that the two of them hold it on behalf of her children, Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles. The house she bought after her divorce, the one asset that has been hers alone for 30 years, no longer has her name on the title of it. That is the sentence in the headline, and now you know what it means. She got out of that house in the only sense that has ever mattered in this family. She took her name off it. The official framing is tidy, and it is probably accurate as far as it goes. Nothing was sold. No money changed hands publicly. The arrangement formalizes what everybody expected anyway, that Ray Mill goes to her children rather than into the royal estate, and putting the title into their side of the family now is orderly, sensible, and the kind of thing solicitors advise people to do in their late 70s. Take the fair version seriously, because it holds up. A woman of that age tiding her private affairs is the least sinister thing in this video. The hard version is about the timing, and the timing is the reason I made this. She moved that title in the same season as the Ravensmere meeting. She moved it without any trustee's consent, because no trustee has any say over a house she bought with her own money in 1996. She moved it out of her own name and into the names of exactly the two people the 1999 amendment had barred from ever holding an interest in a royal settlement. And she did it in a form that no clause signed by a dead queen could ever touch. Read those two events beside each other, and the shock inside that family begins to make sense. Everyone in that building had spent 15 years assuming Camilla's side was the one reaching for property. But on the very morning that assumption collapsed, she went home and gave her own property away. The one thing she owned outright, she handed to her children while she was still alive to sign it over. And she did it before anyone thought to ask her a question about it. Charles, for what it is worth, had bought a house on the lane beside Ray Mill some time earlier, reportedly using around £3 million of his own money, on the private side of the fence rather than through any royal estate structure. Place that purchase beside the transfer of Camilla's title, and you can see two people in their 70s quietly arranging a life where the roof over their heads does not depend on anybody else's goodwill. They had both spent a year building something the trustees could not open. Back at Ravensmere, the afternoon ended the way these things often end inside that family, quietly, with the staff doing the work. Someone unscrewed the small brass nameplate from the door of the upstairs study. The flowers that had gone into that room before 8 in the morning came out at sunset and were thrown into the bin behind the kitchens because nobody wanted them seen anywhere else in the house. The keys came off the hook beneath the portrait of Charles in the estate corridor, where they had hung for the whole of his tenure. They were placed into a plain wooden box for Edward's solicitor to collect. One of the housekeepers carried that vase down the back stairs while Camilla's son was still standing in the corridor waiting for a car. He stepped aside to let her pass. Neither of them said a word. 8 hours earlier, that room had his name on the cleaning rota. Now the nameplate was gone. Inside the wooden box was a note in Edward's handwriting. "Let this house belong to those who need it." The household staff read that note before the family did. By nightfall, word had moved through the estate cottages. And there is one last thing to sit with, because it goes back to a boy at a funeral. Diana's estate was worth around £21 million. Her will was published, the way wills can be published in this country, and anyone could read it. There was a letter of wishes attached concerning her personal belongings, and there was also a variation that pushed back the age at which her sons could take control of what she had left them. 2 boys, 15 and 12, became the subject of paperwork drawn up by adults in offices just days after they had walked behind their mother's coffin. Neither of them had a word to say about any of it. 29 years later, one of those boys walked into a records room with 2 solicitors, and every adult in the building had to sit quietly while he read out a page. The people at that table thought they were fighting a stepson over a house. But they were sitting across from a man who learned at 15 that, in this family, paperwork is often the only thing that survives. And he had been quietly collecting the paperwork ever since. Charles gave away a house he never owned for 15 years. His wife moved her own house out of reach in a fortnight. Between those 2 facts sits the whole story of that marriage. The promises, the protection, the fear, and the late discovery that sentiment means very little when the documents say something else. So the question is not only who lost Ravensmere, the question is who truly won. Was it William, who gave up the house personally but controlled where it legally landed? Was it Edward, who inherited the estate and immediately turned almost all of its use toward wounded veterans, bereaved service families, and young people leaving care? Or was it the 2 women in 1999 who saw a quarter of a century into the future and wrote a clause that waited silently until the exact moment it was needed? That is the part no one can easily dismiss. Because the clause did not shout, it did not accuse, it did not name Camilla's children. It simply waited. And when the assumptions finally reached the records room, the paperwork answered before anyone else could. Tell me what you think in the comments. Was this William protecting the trust, Edward removing the private prize from the argument, or the final victory of 2 women who understood their family better than anyone gave them credit for? Thanks for watching. Please do not forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.